Okay, so hi, everyone, and just welcome to the Only Realty investment series and property investment series. And so looking forward to spending the next 6 weeks, an hour every Wednesday, just chatting about property investment and the opportunities that the current markets are presenting to you guys as potential investors or current investors in terms of getting into the market and also expanding your or expanding your property portfolio. So I'm going to spend a bit of time it's only an hour, so I'm going to try my best to get as much detail in as possible into these sessions for you. Obviously, you can always contact me after to ask any questions you might have that I maybe didn't answer during the session. So we had 170 people registered for today's session, and hopefully those people will be joining us over the period of the next few weeks. So just firstly, I'm going to share my screen and you'll see I don't know if you can see me actually, but I'm going to share my screen and share the presentation going forward, and then you'll be able to see my voice, maybe see a video. But again, just a few things here is that as we go forward, you can use your okay. Cool. So the property investment series is for anybody and everybody. So again, for the following weeks or the next couple of weeks, you're welcome to invite anybody along to join in on these. It's absolutely no sales pitch, it's just a conversation and education around property investment. So just to get started, what are we going to be doing today is, so going all over the place here. Sorry, everybody, right all the way. Let's try that again. No, all the way back. Okay. Okay, so let's start again. So what we're going to be doing here is we're just going to be chatting about property investment as we go through it, and what are we going to be talking. Sorry, everyone. Okay. So what's the schedule look like? Today we're going to be talking about the strategy, goals, and your expert team. So who do you need to have in your team to build your property portfolio, and what is the strategy or goals you need to look to achieve through property investment? Next week I'll be talking about asset protection structures and financing, how to finance your sort of property investment process. The week after that, we're going to be talking about the after purchase and conveyancing process. Specifically in after purchase, we're going to be talking about clauses that you should be looking out for, suspensive conditions that you can have in your agreement that you can use to protect yourself and secure the deal, and as well as understand the conveyancing process. And in the conveyancing process, I actually invited one of our conveyancing attorneys to come in and spend some time with you discussing the conveyancing process itself and again how to protect yourself. On the fourth session, we'll be talking about tools and research. So what are the tools you can use to research a property or an area to make sure that you're investing in the right area and you're going to get a good return. Running the numbers. So, I mean, property investment is about running the numbers. So in session 5, we'll just purely talk about running the numbers and a return on investment. And I'll run through a deal there. And then on day 6 or the 6th session, we'll talk about property management, the Rental Housing Act, and evictions. And again, I've invited an expert eviction attorney to spend some time with you guys there on understanding not only landlord responsibilities, tenant responsibilities, but also how do we go about evicting somebody if there is a breach of lease. Obviously, at the moment, due to lockdown, there's a hold on the execution of eviction orders. But the lockdown's not going to be around forever. We need to realize that beyond this, we're going to have to operate our businesses as efficiently as possible and take care of our investments. So that's our 6 sessions. Obviously, I'll have Q&As on every single session, and there'll be questions answered during each session as well. So hopefully, you guys are going to get a lot of value over the 6 sessions. Just quickly, some sort of bits. We're on a Zoom webinar, so there is a chat box. If you guys want to use the chat box, chat about anything amongst yourselves, or have a chat with anybody that's on here, you can use the chat and you can directly speak to somebody. It's a chat box. If you do have a question, however, please use the Q&A box. The Q&A box, I'll be able to keep an eye on that and make sure that I can answer any questions you have as we're going forward. The Q&A box. So make sure you use the Q&A box. I've got that open on my screen to just then answer any questions you have as we go through some of the content. Questions as we go through. I'll stop and answer any questions you have If there's something that I've mentioned that's unclear, I'm happy to answer it and sort of spend some time on it. It's important that you, okay, it might sound bad. Just quickly on everybody, if you could just put in the chat box, you can hear me okay? I don't know how my sound's coming across to you guys. I can try another microphone or earpiece. But Linda says the sound isn't great at the moment. If you can just let me know in the chat box. Cool. And then if you do ask a question that I'm going to deal with later in the series, I will also refer you to that session. So if, for example, you ask a structuring question, I'll refer you to next week, or financing question, I'll refer you to next week, just so that we keep the questions relevant to what we're discussing today as much as possible. So, Lunta, it seems like sound is okay with other people. I think I'll just check your connection there if that's okay. Cool. Just another note, the session is recorded and will be posted on the Only Realty YouTube channel, so you can revisit the session and sort of, if you do miss something, you can go through that again at a later stage. Okay. Cool. So yeah, so and it's important that you ask questions. I can just sound is bad. So Carol also says the sound is bad. Sound is an issue. Okay. Sound is a bit distorted. Okay. Let's just try this quickly. Okay. Are you able to hear me now? So check that you're able to hear me before we get going. Delay between Bluetooth. Okay. So it's Bluetooth. Okay. Sorry, everyone. Just technical issues. Give me 2 seconds. I'm just going to change the sound quickly. Okay, just want to check that that's a bit better. Okay, let's see how this goes. Okay, cool. So let's do this. Okay, we'll hit it. Okay, so I can't move around as much as I'd like to, but okay, it's okay. Cool. So let's go back here. Okay, so you guys have still got my screen, and just sort of yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay. So then, like I said, please ask questions as much as possible so that it's an interaction session. Again, it's not just about me speaking at you. It's about me answering questions you might have around around your property investment journey, what you're trying to achieve, and what you're really looking to do, and you know, generate wealth through property. So just a quick introduction of who I am, and most of you were invited via our Only Realty franchisees, might be Only Realty clients or either landlords or tenants, or maybe you know somebody who is an Only Realty franchisee or Only Realty business. If you don't, Only Realty is a national franchise business, a real estate agency. We operate mainly in the rental space. We do sales, but our focus has always been and will continue to be property rentals and management. We're really good at it. It's something that we've built our business over the last 9 years, 9 or 10 years on, and we will continue down that road of becoming much better property managers for and effectively asset managers for our clients. So I'm the managing director of Only Realty, have been for the last 9 years, and I'm proud to say that we've shown massive amounts of growth over the last few years because of our focus on the investor, specifically being our landlords, and growing our rental portfolios. I also am the founder of Epic South Africa, which is an entrepreneur and property investor community, which is supporting entrepreneurs and property investors in South Africa via education, training, and the creation of the community. That's been going now for 2 years, and I'm really happy to say that we've grown and have been interacting with around 2,000 property investors and entrepreneurs over the last 2 years, and we continue to grow that business actively. And the last thing, and mainly, and why I'm in this space and why I thought it would be worthwhile doing this type of series is I'm actually at heart, first and foremost, a property investor. I got into property services and property management because I was a property investor in the UK, specifically in London.
And started investing in 2005, so now almost 16 years ago, with a business partner of mine. We built a portfolio in London before I came back to South Africa at the end of 2010. Still have that portfolio in London and have properties in South Africa. But really, the core of why I got into services was that I could never find anybody that purely understood the investor perspective. There were a lot of guys who got into property or property services because it was almost a default career for them, or they felt it was a way to make money. But there's no one that really understood how an investor looks at property, how they need their property managed, how they need their property looked after, and the reporting side. So just something that was important for me that we provided that from my business point of view. So I opened a property management company in London. We ran that for 3 years and sold that to one of the biggest property management companies in Southwest London before returning to South Africa. And then I joined the Only Rentals franchise group in 2011 and joined head office about 6 months later, taking over as managing director. And we converted to Only Realty in 2015 to sort of look at the broader market of sales and rentals. So I'd like to say at heart, a property investor first and foremost, and the other businesses have become as an offshoot. I think it's almost natural as an entrepreneur to look at opportunities, which I've done. So today I specifically wanted to talk about 3 things, and it's going to be really about strategies, goals, and then your power team or your professional expert team that you need to get into property investment, and what you should be really considering when you want to start out. So I'm going to, and I know some of you guys have gone down the route of owning properties, might own 1 or several properties already, but I find a lot of the time that people have invested in property have invested because their mom, their brother, their dad has thought that it's a great idea, but have invested just off the advice of investing without really educating themselves and understanding really what they're getting themselves into. So, you know, even if you're in the space where you've already invested, you've got a small or large portfolio, I think it's definitely worthwhile revisiting your strategy and goals. Also realize that your strategy and goals always change over time, particularly as you get older. And there's this beautiful thing when you're in your 20s, you think that one day you're going to retire when you're 35. And retirement at 35 just means that you've got this level of financial freedom or financial independence. What we realize when we get to 35 is, you know what, financial independence, that the number you needed to be financially independent at the age of 20 differs substantially when you're 35. You know, I'm married with 3 children, and if somebody had said to me at 25 you can be financially free by 35, I would have been absolutely convinced. But then you have your children, and you get married, and you have these expenses and private school fees, and we've got to feed the children as well, unfortunately or fortunately. But the reality here is once you start incurring those expenses, your financial freedom or financial independence the number that you need to be able to cover your monthly costs moves away from you. Therefore, your goals change over a period of time as you mature and you become more financially involved in certain aspects of your life. And therefore, your strategy needs to change and evolve over time. So your strategy when you're 20 or 18 or 16 will be substantially different to your strategy when you're 30, 35, 40, 55. Particularly, you know, as you get older, you start looking at a real retirement age. What do I need to sustain myself through retirement? And the reality here is also we're living longer and longer. You know, people are living to the age of 90, 95, but they're retiring at 60, 65. You know, if you die at 95, you've got 30 years from 65 to look after yourself. You need to make sure that you've got an annuity income that's going to look after you from that point of view. So again, your strategy and your goal definitely changes as you mature. Your risk appetite changes. Now I know that you get some people who are really risk averse and sort of from day one they're substantially risk averse, but you get people who've got this big risk appetite at the age of 45 to take on massive amounts of risk. That differs substantially. What we're talking about today is investment. So I want to really sort of focus down on the investment, and that's around creating future value and annuity income. And the reality here is strategies all differ. This is a ski slope, and you can see, you know, everybody's getting to the same point. And I've never been on a ski holiday, and I would love to get there, but one day soon. But you know, going down a ski slope, everyone wants to end up at the pub to have that glue line at the end of the day. You know, everyone's got the same goal, but they're all going down the strategy differently. We've all got this idea of financial independence, financial freedom that we want to achieve, but we need to, you know, our strategies might all differ, and they differ because of our skill sets, because of our knowledge, because of our time allocation or capital resource we have. So it differs for lots of reasons, but the reality is we all want to get to this very similar goal or very similar achievement. So you need to be very clear on what your goal is so you can achieve, you need to be very clear on what your goal is so you can define your strategy which can help you achieve that goal. I know it sounds a bit airy-fairy, but you need to spend time on really point of view on a day-to-day basis to achieve a goal in 5, 10, 15, 20 years time, or even 30 years time, if that's your goal. So I've got this here, and one of your goals might be that you want to leave your job. You might be in a place where you're stuck in corporate, or you're stuck in a job that you're really not enjoying. And that might be one of your sort of short-term or medium-term goals, or even a long-term goal. It's really just to pack up your job and say to your boss, I'm out of here. I've looked after myself financially because I've invested for an annuity income. I've created an annuity income that looks after my day-to-day expenses, and it allows me now to spend time on things that I really want to do. Just on this one, the problem with the job is that it is the security it provides you. And what we need to realize, and hopefully what you guys have realized through COVID-19 and the lockdown and everything else, is that there's genuinely no real security. There's this illusion of security at every level, but there's genuinely no security in anything, in entrepreneurship as well as in the employed sector. So you really need to start looking at things and really taking control of your own financial future and your own financial destiny. You might really want a fancy sports car, and I've put my dream car up here just as an example. But you might, it might be as materialistic as you just want a really nice car, or you might just want that beach hut holiday home that you can visit on your breaks or on the weekends or over the sim period. The reality is you also might want all three of those things and have them in the background while you just travel the world. So you need to, again, sit down and spend time on why are you investing, rather than just investing for some future unknown period and for some future unknown result. And the reality is, you don't know if you're investing well or you're investing properly if you don't know what you're actually trying to achieve out of it. And I got asked a question the other day by an entrepreneurial coach, and he said to me, why are you doing your business? What is it that you want out of it? And it's a really interesting question that doesn't get asked often to people who are investing or going down the entrepreneurial route. Yes, of course, you want the financial gains of running your own business or investing, in fact, in property. But what do you actually want out of it beyond the financial situation? And I think that's something we really need to drill down into, because if you're doing something purely for money, that's going to wear thin pretty damn quickly. Especially, for landlords who are sitting in properties at the moment, who are sitting in properties where they're not getting their rental because their tenant isn't working. Property investment wears pretty thin when you're not getting your rental. Now you've got to fight with your tenant. You potentially have to go down an eviction route where you have to issue letters of demand. You have to now take money out of maybe a kit you've put aside or out of your monthly salary to cover the bond that was otherwise being covered by a tenant. So it's purely financial, and you're only looking for financial gain. The reasons for what you're doing are going to weigh pretty thin. But if you're looking to achieve a passion, follow a dream, start a business that is a passion business where you are supported by the underlying annuity income from your property investment, that's where things start changing for you. And you start having a reason for getting up in the morning when you're feeling great, for running down that road, for chasing your tenant for the money, for really having the grit and determination to stick through the tough times to make sure that you come out the other side and you are ultimately achieving the goals you want to. Got a piece of advice when I was moving to London, actually, which I think is relevant here, is I was moving out to London in 2002, and all my friends were saying to me, the weather's going to be horrible, the weather's going to be horrible. I think that's the only thing you hear about moving to the UK. You don't hear about earning pounds or traveling the world or 2-hour access to Paris or anything else. Everyone just speaks to you about the weather. And my cousin was actually just coming back from living in the UK, and I said to her, how did you get through this 10-month winter that happens in the UK? And she said to me something which I think is relevant for everything, is what she used to do at the start of winter. She used to book a summer holiday. So during the whole of winter, she always had the summer holiday to look forward to. And I think that's important, that you always have that goal to look forward to, because it helps you get through the tough times, those dark, dreary days, the wet, cold days, and get you to the end goal where you're sitting on a beach sipping a pina colada, if that's what you want. So, so spoken about goals, and I think that individually, all our goals are going to differ. It could be materialistic, it could be a passion project, it could be anything. It could be leaving a legacy for the family. There's so many goals that we can create, and there's nothing wrong with having multiple goals and that with different time frames, and align your initial investment strategy to meet each of those goals on an ongoing basis. But when we're talking about strategy, there's really two strategies that exist in property. There's cash flow, which is where you're getting an annuity income on a monthly basis. So every month you're getting a set amount of income or an amount of income into account every single Rand a month, or 7,000 Rand a month, coming in every single month, and you're left over with the money that's left after paying all the expenses related to that investment. And then you get capital. And that's really where you're going to go down the route of buying a property, refurbing it and selling it, buying a piece of land, building a property on it and selling those properties. So it's really down to you've got your cash flow, annuity income, or capital where you create lump sums of cash at the end of it. For this situation, for what we're talking about today, I really want to just be clear that there's a big difference between investment and speculation. And for me, when you buy a property and you're going to put a tenant in, for example, and you're going to get that money on an ongoing basis, and you're going to then earn your income through various methods, and one of the ways is you're going to earn net income from that property. So if your property is cash flow positive, you'll be left over with a certain amount of money on a monthly basis. So that's first for net income. The second earning you are getting is that some of the tenant's rental is going towards paying down the bond, the capital portion of the bond that you have against that property. And the third income is going to be on the appreciation of that property over a period of time. Now we're sitting in a situation now where we're actually seeing a depreciation in property prices across the country. But one thing I'd like to mention here, and we'll speak about it in research and tools in a couple of weeks' time, is you need to understand that when people speak about the property market and ENCA and the news and Newsroom Africa talk about the property market, they're taking a broad overview of the market and looking at the South African property market as a whole entity, and they're doing averaging across everything. So they're saying, well, the property market the property market in South Africa is down by 20%. The reality is that the property market in South Africa is down 20% on an average basis. But if you took pockets, and we're going to talk about pockets of excellence, if you took pockets of areas, so let's take where I live in Big Bay in Bloberg. If I took Bloberg and I compared it to Goodwood, for example, right now, Goodwood probably has experienced a much lower decline in property values than we have in Big Bay. Big Bay has probably experienced a 20 to 30% decline, whereas in Goodwood, which is a more affordable area, it's probably declined by 10%. So yes, on average, the market has moved by 20% downward between those two areas. But the reality is Goodwood's probably a better space to be investing in now than Big Bay. And we go further than that, we go to Atlantic Seaboard. The Atlantic Seaboard is the Camps Bay, Bantry Bay spaces. Those property prices have probably moved by 40%. And I understand that the values of those properties are so massive that the effect on the average of market movement in Cape Town is huge. So if you excluded Atlantic Seaboard from your statistics, you probably find that the market in Cape Town has declined by 20 to 30%. It's probably only declined by 10 to 15% across the, let's call them normal investment areas. So it's important that if people are talking about the South African investment market, you don't take that on board too much, because it really is an average, and averages really have this ability to skew things. They're always going to be, in any market, pockets of excellence, areas that you should be looking at, should be investing in, because there's always, the reality is prices are driven by demand. The minute there's an oversupply of properties, property prices are going to either stay stagnant or decline, and the minute there's an undersupply of properties, there's going to be a spike in property, despite the economy, despite what's happening around lockdown and anything else. Okay. And interesting, we just came off a call with Uber. Only Realty is an Uber shareholder, and Uber being the bond originator. And it's interesting that they were saying that there's quite a lot more activity than they were expecting, a lot lower activity than there has been in the market over the last couple of months, a lot more activity than they were even expecting. And interestingly, in the East Coast, so talking about Durban, Umhlanga, Belita, that sort of area, there's actually been a lot more activity than they were expecting. So even in this market, there are bonds being approved, there are people actively buying, and it's interesting to hear, even in their call an hour ago, that there are these pockets of excellence that you should be looking out for. But we'll get into researching your area in a later series just to understand how you look at these things. From from an investment versus speculation point of view, this is my view, and it might be sort of a bit different for you guys, but I really feel that if you're going to start investing, and I want to talk about being a property investor, and that's what this series is about being a property investor. That means getting into the market, investing in properties, and remaining invested in properties. Not remaining invested in a single property, but invested in the market itself. Where speculation for me is you going to market, you becoming a developer, or you buying a property to renovate and sell. Now, and you're speculating, because you just don't know the real outcome. You can do all your research, all your due diligence, you get one. subject to property, and I'm not really just speculating that you're going to be able to get out the other end with profit. They might be really good and you might have the skill set or have people in your team that can identify those opportunities, and that's great. But the reality is you're still speculating. And I watch a lot of these renovation shows, and even in these renovation shows, some of these guys are amazing at the flips they do, and the ability to go and renovate a home and sell it for profit. But even those guys that are experts at this, and I mean, TV experts, I suppose, at this, even they sometimes get it wrong. And some of the shows I've been watching recently, they've actually been getting it wrong and have been making losses on their properties. So really, if you're not in a position that you've got enough funding and money to sit and handle a loss, especially your first or second deal, I really suggest you look at building your property portfolio from an investment point of view. Build your cash flow. Once your cash flow sustains you and looks after you, then you stop maybe looking at a speculation space. Just one thing here as well, and I haven't Jan de Cox's sound is terrible. Has my sound gone bad again, guys? I'm sorry. I just want to see my sound's gone. Just if somebody could let me know if my sound's okay. Yeah, sound is fine for me again. Anybody else is struggling with my sound a bit? So Carol says it's bad again. Okay. So my apologies, guys. It might just be my connection. Again, I'm going to carry on going. The sound might come and go. So Will says it's occasionally bad. Okay. So I'm going to carry on going and then just see how we go. Again, this will be available, recorded and available for you guys to review if you miss bits from me. So I do apologize. So again, from a investment point of view, if you're going to get into a property investment space, so you're asking just investment speculation. So I'll explain further. If you're going to get into an investment space in property investment, you're buying a property to hold it and earn and build a business around it. So you're really going into a space where you're a business owner and you are building a property business. I think too many people get into a space where they buy properties just as a sideline without realizing that this is a separate business where you're taking risk, and you're taking risk. If you're taking risk and you are then subject to making profit, but you're also potentially going to make a loss. Emmanuel says there's an echo. I'm using one piece of sound, so I'm using only my earphones and my microphone. So I can just double check that quickly, sorry. Yeah, no, I'm just using one device, unfortunately. So I apologize again. I'll try and take a look at it for next time. Cool. So the difference between investment and speculation. Speculation really is almost gambling. So and you say almost gambling because it's not gambling, but you're going out to a space where you are buying a property and then buying a property, with certain unknown outcomes. Where you're making assumptions. When you're making those assumptions, you may lose money on the lump sum space. Whereas with property investment, you can sit in that property, and yes, the market will move up and down. You might make a loss from a paper point of view, but the only time you're going to make a loss in that investment over a period of time is you materialize that loss through selling the property. So let's use an example. You buy a property now for 100,000 Rand. During COVID-19, it goes down to 80,000 Rand. You've made a paper loss, but for as long as you hold on to that property, you haven't actually realized that loss and materialized that loss. And in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, that property might go up to 120,000 Rand, and therefore you now have a profit. Again, if you hold on to that property, you haven't materialized that profit, but it's sitting in a paper profit position. Whereas speculation, I buy the property now at 100,000 Rand, I renovate it for 20,000 Rand, I try and sell it for 140,000 Rand, but the market comes to me and says they're only going to be willing to pay 100,000 Rand. Now I need to make a decision. If I sell the property now, I'm going to materialize that loss immediately. And if I haven't made any provision to hold on to that property for a period of time, I'm going to have to sell the property. So speculation is much more, much riskier, much more risky. And it's really what developers do. The developers, although they've got a lot of data, they certainly do speculate. Now, I can guarantee you that there are a lot of developers and capital flip strategy investors right now that are in a whole world of pain and trouble. They can't have their build teams on site. They can't do anything with their properties. And in fact, I mean, even if the developers finish their property, they can't have anybody view their stock at home. So it's very, very difficult for them to sell that. And holding costs are one of the biggest costs related to property investment speculation. So having that empty property sitting there waiting for that buyer to come along is a really expensive sort of period of time. So, like I said, I want to focus really for the purpose of this series on investment. So investing in property, buying property, putting tenants in place and achieving that annuity income to firstly profit from the annuity income on a monthly basis, or some sort of future profit from capital appreciation. And I want to get I'm going to do this. You guys would have seen the slide when I flipped through earlier. But I really just want to get a bit boring here, and I went on to Investopedia to look for the definition of investment. An investment is an asset or an item acquired with the goal of generating income or appreciation. In the economic sense, an investment is the purchase of goods that are not consumed today, but are used in the future to create wealth. Overall, that definition says to me that we buy and hold the property, we put a tenant in place, and over a period of time, we will then generate two things: is income and appreciation. Speculation is where we buy property, we force appreciate it through renovation, and we try and sell it. I hope that answered the question there for whoever posted it there earlier. It was for Ipeleng. Ipeleng, I hope that helps your answer there. So like I said, I just want to get it boring then. So let's look at the opportunities we have in the property investment market, and I'll go through these slowly to try and explain each of these quite carefully. If we're looking at property investment now, I mean, I've got the waterfall there to represent cash flow on an ongoing basis, but let's take a look at cash flow. First and foremost, the one everybody knows is buy-to-let. And buy-to-let is really buying a property, putting a single tenant, and by single tenant, I mean single tenant or single tenant family. So we have one lease in the property, and then we will rent it out on a monthly basis. It's the most common strategy that's used amongst everybody, and I think it's more because you don't realize that there's actually more opportunity to create cash flow than is out there. And developers really use the buy-to-let model to sell their properties, and they talk about yield a lot, and I'll talk about yield in the running of the numbers. But yield is such a poor indicator of an investment. It's crazy, but it's used because it's a really good marketing tool. So from your point of view as a property buyer, you need to realize, and we'll get into definitions of yield and return investment in the numbers session. I think it's session 5. But yield is a really poor indicator of a good investment. I mean, you really need to run the numbers and dig down into the detail to understand whether you're going to be investing into a good property or not. So buy-to-let is the most basic, and it's really the low risk strategy. There's not much to it. It's easy to, or relatively easy to manage. It's really easy to do. But often, and the problem in South Africa is buy-to-let properties that are cash flow positive are very, very difficult to find. The reason for that is twofold. Is our interest rates, although they're at an all-time low, are still relatively high from an international perspective. You know, sitting in the UK prime rates at currently 0.25. I think in the US it's also 0.25. So international interest rates are really low. But interestingly, from a South African perspective, the way we repay our bonds is also very different to international. In the US and the UK, you're able to take out a bond, for example, £200,000 or $200,000, and only pay the interest portion over a period of 20 years, instead of paying down the actual capital value of the property. Why is that? Well, the banks, they've taken the view that property over a period of time naturally increases in value and appreciates. So if a property increases in value and appreciates, they will always have their security against that property. Part 2 is you're paying interest over a period of time at the full owed amount. So if you take out a £200,000 bond, you're paying interest on £200,000 over a period of time. Whereas in South Africa, you're paying interest on the 200,000 Rand bond on month 1, but in year 15, you're paying on the interest on a much lower amount. So their profit is much higher from a bank perspective. It's a good thing and a bad thing for us, because when we're not repaying the capital portion, our monthly cash outflow to the banks in terms of our bond payment is much lower, and it creates an opportunity internationally in the US and the UK to buy cash flow positive properties. So again, in South Africa, because we're repaying the capital portion and the interest portion of our bond, we are sitting in a position where our repayments are much higher as a proportion to our rent, and therefore it takes away a lot of the opportunity for us to create net cash flow positive income. Part 2 is levies in South Africa are really expensive for various reasons, but levies in complexes are really expensive, and something that's often overlooked when people are buying properties, that they look at section type of property, and you buy a R1 million property, you're going to pay 10,000 Rand bond on a monthly basis, and you're getting 12,000 rental, and you looking levy cost. And the average levy at the moment is 1,500 rand. You add 1,500 rand onto 10,000 rand bond, and you add rates and taxes, and which is your responsibility. You're going to get to a position where that property is break even. Now, unfortunately, I've never got into property or business to just break even, because break even doesn't feed the family. And one of my property coaches that I had several years ago said, negative, so capital appreciation, negative cash flow doesn't buy me plane tickets. He was obviously a massive traveler. In reality here is, if you want to make a decision from an investment point of view, it's something that's going to change your day-to-day life, that's going to add value to your life on an ongoing basis and actively. You can't go into a position where you're buying a property that's either negative cash flowing, because that's actually just going to make your lifestyle tighter, because you're going to have to take funding from your regular income, your job, and you're going to have to put it into a property because it's negative cash flowing. And if you're doing that situation, what you're also doing is you're just supplementing the tenant's ability to live in a place that he couldn't otherwise afford. Because if you are paying a 10,000 rand bond and you're only getting 8,000 rand rental, that tenant, to live in a place that he owned it, would have to pay 10,000 plus all the other costs of ownership. Whereas you're just supplementing it, because you also remember you're paying maintenance on the property. So I really encourage you to focus on buying cash flow positive properties. How do we do that? Well, I'll get into that later in the series. How do we find these properties? How do we run the numbers? How do we figure out what's going to be cash flow positive and how we're going to make money? So buy-to-let is really the really easy, low-risk space, and it's the most common strategy for cash flow. The next one is, So next one is co-living or communes. This is one of my favorite strategies, and in fact forms the majority of the strategy that I've taken over in property investment over the last 15 years. Co-living or communes, the easy one and the buzzword at the moment is student lets. So student letting, where you have one property with individual rooms, and you rent those individual rooms out on multiple leases. The reason that is quite an exciting strategy is two things. You're taking a very inefficient property, so let's take a 3 or 4 bedroom house, and you could potentially add, put 4 tenants in a 4 bedroom house and make use of other spaces in the property that would have otherwise been used as communal or open areas. So for example, a dining room that's got a door in it and windows could be turned into a bedroom and could be income generating. Remembering co-living or communes, the income is generated from bedrooms only. So if you're renting out a bedroom, the more bedrooms you rent out, the more income you have. Second reason is you've got 5 or 6 leases against a single property. However, you've only got one bond. So let's take an example where you buy a 2 million rand property, you've got a 20,000 rand a month bond, but you have 5 or 6 tenants paying 4,000 rand a month. There's 6 tenants paying 4,000 rand a month, you're getting 24,000 rand in, but you've got a 20,000 rand bond, which is great. But if, let's say, 3 of those tenants don't pay, you're still getting 12,000 rand. So your net loss on that month, where the tenants have only paid half, is still only 12,000 rand. Whereas in buy-to-let, if you have one tenant in one property and that one tenant doesn't pay, you've lost 100% of your ability to pay the bond from your rental, and you have to supplement that from your own income. So co-living or communes is a really exciting space for me, and I think, and I'll speak in property investment series with Epic, is that we talk about professional communes being the next exciting space for people to go towards, because property professional communes allow affordability, allow community living, and also allow people to live in areas of space or close to amenities that they couldn't otherwise afford on their own. So if we talk about Cape Town, communes allow people to live in Woodstock, in communes there, and easy access into town that they wouldn't have otherwise been able to afford individually. Also, a lot of young professionals are coming out of student accommodation and looking for accommodation, and they're used to living in communes with shared spaces and shared amenities. So it's actually quite common for them, and they are expanding their sort of community and network through that. So it's a really comfortable space for them, but they're willing to pay a bit more for slightly nicer spaces. They are working, so you've got income earners in your property, which is what you don't have within student letting space. The other problem with student letting is that generally you're only getting 10 months out of 12 months rent paid, whereas on the professional commune, you're getting 12 of 12 months. So it's a much better space for me, it's a much more exciting space. And I think it's one of the biggest growth areas in the next 5 years in the South African property investment space is professional communes, which is really exciting. Be careful not just to go and buy a property anywhere and try and rent out all the rooms. You do need certain regulations, certain planning requirements. There are bylaws of Joburg around communes that you need either special permission or planning permission. So just be aware of the rules around communes in your area before you just go and buy a property to try and rent out individual rooms. Commercial is the next one, and commercial is an interesting one because although you can catch the positive out of it, and again, it's sort of a hybrid between communes, so renting out a multi-let, let's call it multi-let, where you're renting out multiple spaces in one property, but then to businesses. And although it could have been exciting a year ago, I think what the lockdown has done is shown that the vulnerability the commercial market has to small businesses. I still think there's a big opportunity in commercial. You're just going to have to find that niche and find that space for your relevant area. There was a big trend towards shared office spaces in the last few years. And I think out of everybody, the shared office space for guys that are actually burning money now through lockdown. I mean, really struggling. So just be careful when you get into space, but I do think there's going to be an opportunity in cash in commercial in the next 2-3 years from an expansion point of view, making flexible spaces, flexible leases, and cheapening the actual cost to the commercial entities so that they can get themselves going. So in that startup space, I think it'd be quite exciting. Short-term letting, again, is something particularly in Cape Town that sort of had a massive boom in the last 2-3 years. And it was actually one of the things that I attribute the big capital appreciation in Cape Town, the boom over the last 3 years in property prices, was to Airbnb or short-term letting. Really what the strategy entails is renting a property out or buying property, a 2-bed or 3-bed property or even a 1-bed, and then putting it onto Airbnb or any other short-term letting platform and trying to make sure that your occupancy is high enough at a nightly rate that is high enough that exceeds the cost of that property to you on a monthly basis. So for example, there were guys in Cape Town that were renting 1-bedroom flats out for 12,000, 14,000 rand. They were achieving 30,000, 35,000 rand a month short-term letting income through Airbnb on their property. That declined over a period of time, and that was probably 2.5 years ago. I mean, as of last year, they probably weren't achieving more than 15,000, 16,000 rand a month. And right now, where we sit is that all those guys are sitting with empty properties unless they have provided them as isolation and accommodation, which is again something that very few people are going to be able to achieve. So a lot of those short-term letting units are sitting empty. The problem also with that strategy is you're sitting in a space where you're competing in firstly a highly contentious market where you've got the hotels and the hospitality groups fighting with government to regulate that space a bit more. They're saying it's an unregulated space. But you've also got sectional type of schemes and body corporates that are really anti Airbnb because they don't want, from a security point of view, people moving in and out, people that they don't necessarily know. And the last one is you've got these big short-term letting companies who are able now to use Airbnb and eBookers and Booking.com to list their stocks. They're actually competing on a wholesale basis against you as the individual. So it is a really difficult space, but again, there are certain niches or pockets of excellence that you can really take advantage once the lockdown is finished, that you can take advantage of on the short-term lettings perspective. Just on short-term letting, sorry, it's also quite a nice complementary strategy if you're in the student letting space. So if you're in the student letting space, you've got a whole lot of rooms and the students move out at the end of November, December, January, you've got the property empty. You can then put them into the short-term letting space to rent them out to people who are maybe traveling, students going on their student holidays or treks if you really want to risk that, or even families that are looking for cheaper accommodation in certain areas. Rent-to-rent is another strategy that you can use for cash flow, and this is something that's not spoken about often and doesn't excite that many people that own properties, but it's really quite an interesting one. Is rent-to-rent is a space where you go and rent a property for a certain value, 10,000 rand a month, and you find a way to make the property more efficient or add value to it. And there's different ways you can do that, but basically you go and rent a property out at, for example, 10,000 rand, and you find that somebody who's willing to rent that property for 14,000 rand, and you take the margin. That doesn't entail property ownership, and it is also not an investment, but it definitely gets you into the market and allows you to get access to understand how property works and create your property business. So it could be the really starting point. If you don't have the capital or the credit record right now to get into ownership, you can still get into property and make money in property through a rent-to-rent strategy. And I just want to give an example here if you think it's impossible, but a lot of builders, and those of you that are builders on this call now, might know or realize how this is rent-to-rent is really where not a lot of builders have their own compacting machines. What they'll do is they'll need to compact a certain area for a client. They'll go to a hire shop, they'll go and rent the compactor, they'll bring it to the property, let's say cost them 1,000 rand for the 3 or 4 days that they need to use it. They'll then charge the client 1,500 rand for the 3 days. They've rented the equipment from a hire shop. They've then re-rented it to the owner of the property at 500 rand more, and because obviously the labor is paid separately. So rent only be in building equipment, and it's exactly the same can be done in property. If you are going to do a rent-to-rent strategy, it's really a rent and sublet strategy. If you are going to sublet, make sure that you have permission of your landlord in writing on the lease. Make sure that you are transparent with it. Don't try and rent a property out that you rent from somebody without being being transparent about that, because you will end up a breach of lease and have issues around that. So it's very important that you do communicate with the landlord or the property owner how you're going to do and what your intention is. Why would they do it? Well, you get a lot of landlords who are sick to death of owning property. They don't want to have to worry about tenants. They don't worry about maintenance, for example, or they're what do we call them? Unwilling landlords, where they've moved, for example, and they just can't sell their property, which I think is going to become very relevant in the market going forward. That people need to move for whatever reason, for work, immigration, whatever else, and they're stuck with a property that they just need to rent out to cover their costs. You can provide them security around their ongoing monthly payments. You can then potentially find the opportunity to make a margin on monthly rental. And my last one, and I think this is a big one, and this is for the more sophisticated guys and the guys that are really willing to invest heavily in the market, is develop to rent. And this is a space where a lot of the pension funds in the UK went down, where the UK government is driving people towards and portfolio landlords towards, is to develop to rent. They need more housing there, and they want them. They don't want to go into the private sector. They don't want to deal with individual landlords. What they want is massive amounts of stock coming to market and then managed and owned by single portfolio investors. And that's going to be very much the same thing here. Not driven by government here, but it's a massive opportunity here, because remember, when you develop, you're developing at potentially 70% of retail cost. So if a developer is going to sell you a property at R1 million, it's probably costing between 650 and 700,000 rand to develop, and then they make that margin on top. And then you're going to rent it out at 10,000 rand. But as a developer, if you develop at 700,000 rand, you're still going to achieve the 10,000 rand rental. Therefore, the yields in your return go up and go through the roof, because you're paying much less for that capital, or your capital investment is much lower than at a retail level. So I'm really talking about being a wholesaler here, a wholesale developer where you rent out the stock. Bowen have done it through their Bowen rental division. I know there's a couple of developers like in Joburg, Renica, for example, who are doing the same thing, where they're developing and holding on to it. And in fact, Century Developments have done exactly the same thing. They're developing thousands and thousands of units, but holding on to them to achieve that annuity income, and the returns they're making are huge. So develop to rent is definitely space as you mature into the space that you really want to start considering. If you're a Cape Town investor, there's a massive opportunity here to buy a property. For example, in the Durbanville area, you've got a massive garden, because the Cape Town bylaws allow you now to, with very little effort, to get permission to build 2 additional residential units onto that single residential property. So you can quickly go become a small-time developer, putting 3 units onto a property that cost you that you bought a single residential, and achieve 3 rentals from 1 property. So it's a really big opportunity here to develop to rent. And I definitely think if it's your intention to make property investment a really serious business for yourself, that you really need to look at develop to rent as a strategy or goal from a business point of view for later on. So I don't see any questions. I haven't seen any questions come through in relation to any of these. But I mean, obviously, again, I'm just speaking and it's been 40 minutes and haven't had many questions. But feel free to sort of add questions as we go along. You know, I'm quite keen to sort of interact. I can also allow you to speak if you want to sort of rather speak rather than type a question. So just let me know as we're going along. The next part to talk about is experts and roles in the development series, and you know, or in your property investment journey. And really, there's no room here for somebody to get into property investment and go solo. It's very important that you build your team and get the right people in place. And one thing here is the most expensive advice you can get is free advice. So don't take advice from the guy who owns 1 property and has based all his experience and investment knowledge on that single property. If you intend to build a big portfolio, go to somebody who's built a big portfolio and get advice from them. Take their advice, take their learnings. There's also no need, and this is a lesson that I learned early on, and it was Richard, my business partner, and our arrogance and I suppose our ego in our mid-20s, is we were going to just change the market, do things differently. And we went out to market, we started investing and tried to reinvent the wheel. And it took us 4 or 5 years to really get realize earlier on that we were just replicating what everybody else was doing. And we were trying to reinvent it, something that had already been done a million times over. We just plugged into the right network and the right set of experts. We would have achieved our goals far, far quicker. So quickly, just a question here. Will is asking, in my opinion, what's better, residential, commercial? So I think I'm not going to say which is better for the long term. In the short to medium term, certainly residential is going to be better, only because business are under so much pressure due to lockdown. And I know lockdown is going to end, and we all realize that lockdown, who knows when, but it is going to end. But businesses are going to still be under pressure for a period of time. They're going to carry that damage, and they're going to limp along for probably 18 months to 2 years post this lockdown. I mean, the number of businesses that shut down just in 6 weeks of lockdown is insane, and we haven't even started seeing the real damage yet. So I would say in the short to medium term, certainly residential. There's always going to be demand for properties, residential properties, but I think also we need to be clear that it's not residential commercial only, but it's also within residential. What is the sector we need to be looking at? And the sector in South Africa that we certainly need to be far more considerate of and far more willing to get into and engage with is that affordable sector. And I'm not talking RDP housing and sort of low cost housing at all. I'm talking affordable, where the real affordability in South Africa. If you look at the average salary in South Africa, gross income, and you'll be surprised to know that the average salary in South Africa is about 16,000 rand a month. And the net take-home salary is around, I think, 13,000 rand a month is the average take-home salary. So if you look at that as an average, and again, I spoke earlier about averages, how averages really skew things. If you look at that as an average salary, and you say, well, people should only be paying 30% of their income towards rental, you then get into a space where at 13,000 rand a month, they should only be paying 3,900 rand a month in rental towards property. So we're really looking at rental between 4,000 and 8,000 rand is the space that I think that we should really be going towards from an investment perspective for the long term, from an affordability point of view. But that's where your mass market is, and that's where you really should be focusing on, particularly from a cash flow perspective. So well, I hope that answers your question. I think residential is a space to go. There's always going to be demand, particularly in South Africa. There's a movement from informal properties into formal properties. But I think it's a really good space to go. Carol's asking, if you buy a building, does it mean that you can offer between 10 and 20% less in value? You can't say that it's a buyer's market. It's a buyer's market. Okay. So if you're going to buy a whole lot of units, so if you're going to buy 10, 20 units, generally when they sell a building, they're going to be generally when you buy a building, they're going to price the building entirely, not individual units. If you're going to go to a developer and buy wholesale stock, so you're going to buy 15 or 20 units within a development, you can certainly negotiate a price there. And I mean, between 10 and 20% less value, absolutely you could. Like I said, developers are in dire straits at the moment, so it's important that you do consider that. Is it a buyer's market? It's absolutely a buyer's market right now. If you've got the funding and the ability to buy property, you're in the pound seats at the moment, and that for me is going to ring true for the next 2 to 3 years. So it's going to be important that we go that you're considerate of that. So very, very important. Cool. So Carol, I hope that answers your question for you. And then so Uber reckons that interest rates going to drop about another 1.25 basis points. So we're going to get into a position where we're going to have really favorable interest rates for us to get into the investment market. But what Uber did say earlier as well was that the banks are definitely building buffers, because they are of the opinion post-lockdown in the next year or two that interest rates are most certainly going to increase. And we've got to definitely consider the fact that interest rates are going to increase from a low. The rates, they can't really go much lower than another 1.5, 1.25, 1.5 basis points, but they're certainly going to increase going forward. Do I think that the residential market's do I think the residential market's going to drop more in months to come? Absolutely. We haven't really seen the results of lockdown come through yet. People are still able to sort of short-term cover their shortfalls and everything else. And the banks are also, because the National Credit Act are not able to issue notices against properties yet. So they've got to wait for lockdown to end, and then they can send out their breach notices in terms of repayments and stuff. So we're sitting in a position right now where there's really low demand, but we're going to get into a position in probably 4 to 6 months, even 8 months time, where we're going to see a position where there's lots of stocks going to come to market. there's going to be lots of motivated sellers, people who are motivated to sell because of financial reasons, that are going to have to. I think the markets from an investment point of view is as exciting now as it will be in 6 to 8 months. Let's focus on, for everything for me, it's focusing on 2021. 2021 is going to be the year of investment. What's the saying? Don't waste a good recession. Cool, so that's there. Then on the question side here, we've got a quick question regarding Airbnb. Can a body corporate pass internal laws such as cancelling Airbnb businesses within a complex after the entire sales strategy was focused on reeling in short-term leasing investors to buy properties? And once sales are finalized, the body corporate can change the rules. What are your legal options? So I'm unfortunately not a lawyer, but I'm certain that you could approach CSOS in that regard to have a view of it. You also, obviously, as an owner, have a say in terms of change of rules at the AGM. Those rules need to be approved at an AGM. They can't unilaterally just change those. If the body corporate overall, from an ownership point of view, does vote to change those rules within the section titled Schemes Management Act, then unfortunately it's one of those things. So we've got to play on the field that we're allowed to play in, and currently a lot of businesses can't operate. So we're all sitting waiting for the opportunity to go and operate. So we can't go outside of the law to try and do our own thing here. We need to really play in the space of what the hand we're dealt. If the body corporate does change the rules, maybe what you should have done prior to buying for short-term investment is that things do change. You need to maybe have 2 or 3 other options of what you can do with that property. So you don't only invest in property for one strategy. So let's say buy-to-let, but you invest for buy-to-let, but potentially sell it at a profit in the short term, or rent it out as a commune, or potentially rent it out as an Airbnb. So you've got multiple options. I think that's vitally important from a risk point of view, is that you've got multiple options with a single property. Because if you go in with one option on that property and you can only do one thing, and the market changes, lockdown happens, or anything else, you really have no other options. I'm writing a sort of side note here, is I'm writing a chapter of the book that I intend to one day finalize. And one of the things it's talking about the superhero and the sidekick. And the superhero is your strategy, your primary strategy, or your business. And what gets often overlooked in business and in property investment is your sidekick. And the sidekicks are the other streams of income, or the other strategies that you can use that property for, the other streams of income within your business. And I think what the lockdown has done is exposed a lot of people that they're so focused on the superhero that they've ignored the sidekicks. And when the superhero gets kicked and is down and bloodied and lying on the floor, there's no sidekick to step in and help and assist. And it's something that you really need to consider from a business point of view, but also from an investment point of view. You always need to focus on the sidekicks as well. Okay. So David's asking, any comments about using trusts to hold properties for rental? This is just an opinion, again, not financial advice, and certainly worthwhile going to an attorney like David to have a conversation around structuring your business, also getting tax advice and speaking to your accountant, because they've got an overall view of your investment. But the broad and general advice is to certainly hold any properties or investment properties in a PTY Limited, in your limited company, and then to have the shares of that company held by a trust. Why is that? Well, there's a few reasons. You ring fence the risk of each of your strategies within the various companies you have, and the shares are held by a trust outside of your personal name, because you're generally going to stand surety for the bonds that you hold against those properties. So if something goes wrong on one property, they'll come and attach the property, but also go after you in your personal name. If you have no assets in your personal name, there's nothing for them to attach, because remember, the ownership of the shares sits within the trust, and you are separate legal persona. So because you're separate legal persona, the assets that or the shares that sit in the trust aren't owned by you, and therefore can't be attached. So you are just ring-fencing risk. Part 2 is that you want to have that trust in place for later on, and unfortunately, just so you guys all do know, I want to confirm we're all going to die. And when we do pass away, there's a estate duty applied to the assets that you own in your own name above a certain level. Again, I'm not sure it's recently changed, but whereas if the assets are owned in a trust, that trust continues beyond your death. You just get removed as a trustee and a beneficiary, and the trust continues on, and there's no estate duty applied to the assets within that trust. So David, I hope that's sort of clear, and it's pretty accurate from your point of view, and you being the lawyer and the expert there. Cool. What is the best avenue to shop for repossessions, and how does it generally work? So how do they do have lists that you can go to, or you go to the auctions where they auction these repossessions. But really, the investment opportunity is not at getting repossessions, because the banks have gone through a lot of court cases recently where they've been required to make sure that they are trying to achieve as close to market value for these repossessed properties as possible. Where you really want to get into the investment space is getting the properties from the guys prior to repossession. So the guys who have contacted the banks and said, listen, I'm in financial trouble and I need some help, and they are then mandated to sell those properties, or even before they approach those banks, and giving them options to help them and assist them in their current situation, to get them out of the situation. But remember, because the problem with property is that it's a big capital cost, and that's where a lot of people's wealth sits. And because a lot of their wealth sits in that space, and if they've got a short-term cash flow issue, medical bills, bond repayments, any monthly costs, you can't simply go pull a brick out of a wall and now pay with that. If all your asset and your value is sitting in the property, it's very difficult to realize that. You as an investor will go to them and help them realize their short-term cash flow issues or short-term payment issues, but it's off the back of that asset that they have where the real value is sitting. So I don't think you shop for repossessions necessarily as much as you shop for motivated sellers who are in financial distress at some level. Cool. So I just want to clear these quick so I can stay on top of them. There we go. The price, so in the price range, I'll suggest what is better: 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, single rental, so not communist shared rental. Again, very difficult and very market specific and very area specific. You might be in an area, and let's use Parkhurst example, which is certainly a family area where it's a family with 1 or 2 young children that they want to have a pedestrianised lifestyle in Parkhurst and Joburg. So there you'll be looking at a 3-bedroom property potentially. Whereas if you move towards the Four Ways or the Bryanston, you probably generally have your young accountants or young couple that only need a 1-bedroom flat. That's their startup space. That's what they can afford. So it really is area specific, and that's got a lot to do then with your research in terms of pricing, rental and demand. And remember, when you invest, you're always investing for demand. So you're investing into buy-to-let because you know there's demand in the area for the buy-to-let you're going to offer, or you're going to go and invest in a student let because you know there's a demand from students in that area. You're not going to go and get a student let in Kuruman. There's no university in Kuruman, so you're not going to get any students. So you won't invest in a student let in Kuruman. And I know it's an extreme example, but the ridiculous thing is a lot of people will decide they're going to go into the student let market and rent in an area where there's no students, or there's very few students with very little demand. So it's important that you research your area and understand your area inside out. And if you ever read Robert Kiyosaki's book, he really researches areas to the level where he jogs areas, speaks to people on the street, understands what's happening in the market when he's going to invest in those areas. The reason he jogs the streets is that you can, when you're driving around, it's very difficult to look at properties and look at houses. It's also very difficult to speak to people. So get to know people in your area. And again, I'm not an expert yet, but it's about speaking to the experts in that area, the geographical experts, the guys that know that space, getting to know them well, and they can then help you. So it's not just about you knowing an area, it's about the people you know who know the area well. So Denise, I hope that answers your question there for you. I've got some questions here. When purchasing property, better to purchase trust or personal capacity. So these, I think I answered that question earlier. It's better to buy in a P2R limited that's owned by a trust. But if you're getting started, I would just say you just buy property and know that, or understand that this is for you. The property investment isn't for everybody, and I've met landlords who've gone into the space, bought property and thought, I actually don't like this tenant landlord thing, and I'm out. Whereas some people have bought and really flourished in the space. So for the long term, it's certainly better to have the ultimate ownership is in a trust, but certainly not directly. The trust and tax implications are huge. Trusts get taxed at 45% on net income, and they get taxed at 36% on capital gains across the board. So it's really, trust is absolutely the last place you want to have ownership of an income generating asset. If you can help it, you really want everything to sit within the company, where you are a director of the company or multiple directors, and then the shareholder is the trust company. I think it's cool. Okay, great. So let me get on to experts quickly, because already it's the hour's flown. So So the experts and their roles within your investment strategy. So you really need to start aligning with experts that can help you build a team. So I'm going to talk about two teams. I'm going to talk about business partners and companies in place and different agreements in place. You really need an attorney that understands the structure you're trying to create. But and I'm talking about a commercial attorney. So you need a commercial attorney who understands agreements and contracts very, very well. That attorney differs to your conveyancing attorney, so they're not the same. So your commercial contracting attorney understands commercial agreements, commercial structures, and structuring, which is important. And separately, you're going to have a conveyancing attorney. Now, I know, particularly in the current market, every attorney is going to profess to be able to do everything for you because they need the business. But the extreme example here is I'm not going to go to a divorce attorney to process the purchase of my property. You can, and they need a conveyancing qualification, but you can go to them. But I really want to go to a firm or a person that their expertise lies in conveyancing if I want to do a transfer of property. But also, if the expertise lies in transferring the property, I really don't want to have them drafting my agreements because I think there could be potential issues there, and they may potentially lack the expertise or the knowledge or the experience to really put you in the best possible position. So your conveyancing attorney and your commercial attorney are two different. They could be at the same firm, but they're different people. Then a mortgage broker or bond originator, and that is really something that you need to consider because all the banks are really keen to get business, but you really want one place to fill out paperwork and then send that out to the multiple banks. They have a relation with the multiple banks, and they're able then to negotiate the best rate for you. I know that traditionally people will go directly to their own bank immediately and assume that they're going to get the best rate. My suggestion is go to a broker and allow that broker to negotiate the best deal for you. They have the relationships, they've got credit committees sitting on their floor normally, and they can also do the appeals process much better than you can. They understand that space, they understand requirements. So it's important that you do choose a mortgage broker. There's a couple of big guys. I mentioned Uber as a bond originator. There are a couple of big guys out there that you really want to make use of or go to. And you build a personal relationship with those guys as well as you build a portfolio. Accounting is vitally important, obviously, for two reasons. Particularly from a tax perspective, you don't want to be in a position where you are earning money, net income, which is additional income to your existing income, and you put yourself into a position where you're going to have to be paying tax in because you haven't offset the expenses, or you put yourself in a position where you've moved yourself into a higher tax bracket, and there's a much higher cost there. So your net income actually becomes a net deficit because of taxes. So you need to spend time with your accountant again. Your accountant, your attorney, and your tax advisor are the people that you want to spend time with in terms of structuring to make sure it's the most efficient structure for you to be able to grow your business. A property mentor coach is just somebody, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a paid person, but it could be a paid person as well. But it's just somebody who's done what you're trying to do. Now, I alluded to it earlier. If you're trying to build a 10, 50, 100 portfolio business, unit portfolio business, you're not going to go to a guy who owns his own home and he's going to be your property coach or mentor. You really need to find somebody who is experienced, has burnt their fingers, has had a nosebleed, and is willing to share that experience with you. Remembering that there's nothing that can replace genuine experience, which you'll gain as you go down this process. But learning from other people's mistakes is certainly a leverage point that you should have as an investor. Estate agents still sell the majority of the properties in the country. So most property transactions, and I'm not going to throw a figure here, but most property transactions in the country still go via estate agents. So don't turn your back on estate agents because you want to save a buck through for the seller. The reality is estate agents still have a place and a position for you. And by finding the right group of estate agents, they're worth their weight in gold. Because if they understand your strategy, what you're looking for, and the opportunities, you're going to have, instead of yourself out there looking for deals, you're going to have a team of 10, 15, 20 estate agents that as soon as a deal that matches your criteria comes in, they're going to bring it to you. So again, it's just leveraging networks as much as possible. So definitely you need to find estate agents that understand your investment strategy, understand how to look at the numbers, and don't waste your time. I think there's a big element of time wasting a lot of estate agents. I need a 3-bedroom, freestanding property, and they bring you a 2-bedroom section type unit. Really need to get people that buy into the fact that you are an ongoing customer. The estate agents that realize that you are a long-term client are the estate agents that are looking to build a business as an estate agency and therefore willing to spend time with you as you research these deals and go on. And the problem with a lot of estate agents, again, is very much similar to the wedding industry, is, how much does a wedding cake cost? A wedding cake, 3-tier wedding cake costs, 3,000-4,000 rand sometimes. But if you 3-4-tier birthday cake costs you 1,500 rand. Why do they do that? Because the wedding industry knows that in general, it's a once-off transaction. It's not a return transaction. And very much same for estate agents. Estate agents, unfortunately, do a lot of transactions, home buyer transactions, as one-off transactions. You buy a home, you're in that house for 10, 15 years. They're going to see you 15 years' time if they're still around, if you're still around. Whereas as an investment buyer, the estate agent that realizes that you're going to be buying on an ongoing basis and building a portfolio is the guy that you want to stick with. Property manager differs from a estate agent, and again, a property manager is an expert in managing property. And there's a difference between an estate agent and property manager in terms of expertise and skill level in knowledge. The estate agent is skilled in negotiation and sales, whereas a property manager manages the tenant-landlord relationship, understands the acts, understands how to deal with maintenance, understands the urgency of things, has the infrastructure, systems, and processes in place to efficiently manage your property, but also to receive the funds and distribute those funds to any expenses. So at the property, where the estate agent brings you deals and brings you property and enables you to negotiate the best possible price, property manager really manages your asset for you and really adds value there. And the cost of that property manager could be between 10 and 12% on a monthly basis. But really what they're doing is providing you two things, is more time, because you're not spending time on your portfolio, managing your portfolio separately, but also it should be adding enough value to your property, your portfolio through their management, that they actually offset their cost on an ongoing basis. And what I mean by offsetting their cost is that they will ensure that maintenance is done, that there's no damages, that your insurance isn't voided because the tenant's acting a certain way, making sure damages from the tenant are taken care of, and that if the tenant doesn't pay, that action is taken in a timeless manner to ensure that you can evict if you need to, or issue brief letters or anything else. So those processes are really cut down the time that you need to spend on the property and try and make your asset work harder for you. I put town planner here only because if you're going to get into a space where you want to now start either developing, you develop to rent, or you want to take the property and change its use, or anything else, you're going to need a town planner that's going to be able to give you advice on zoning regulations, a structural engineer if you're going to do development again, or change any structural things around the property to enable it to earn more money. For example, buying a 2-bedroom property and then converting it into a 3-bed and work on a load-bearing wall, or open planning a space to make it more exciting or more user-friendly, so you need a structural engineer. And then a property inspector. And property inspector is actually somebody that you get in before you even own the property, to inspect that property to make sure that you're not taking on something that you don't know. We all like to pretend we're experts in understanding what the cracks are, what the damp is, and we get the estate agent gets told by the owner that no, the damp was just I spilled a bucket of water, when the reality is it could be rising damp from the center of the property because of foundations, there's an issue with foundations, or there could be so many reasons that we don't understand as the experts. We can't expect estate agents to be experts that aren't trained in understanding maintenance issues around the property. So getting a specialized property inspector is important, and the cost for that is between 3,000 and 4,000 rand for an inspection, a thorough inspection of the property before you even buy. If you're buying a property that's anywhere between 500,000 to 1 million rand to 2 million rand, 3,000-4,000 rand is definitely an investment worth your while if you're serious about buying a property, rather than the cost, taking the cost of issues that might be there that you don't otherwise see. And just so you know, here there is a responsibility on the and a requirement on the seller to disclose any issues. But really, if you want to try and go through a court process in South Africa to try and get that property transaction either reversed or claim damages against that previous owner, then I really wish you well. Rather just have the property inspection done up front, be very clear. And if they pick up anything that's major, one of the two options: you either negotiate the price lower, considering the property inspection, or you walk away from the deal because it just is no longer a deal. So vitally important that you do find a good property inspector. And then an architect, because they're involved in any changes in terms of the plans or if you build onto a property or anything else. So definitely have a good architect. The guys on the left are all non-geographical, so they don't need to be even in the province that you operate in. They can just be available to you in experts. My accountant, I live in Cape Town, my accountant lives in Joburg in the East Rand. Our mortgage broker, again, I make use of the guys in Joburg. Conveyance attorney actually sits in Joburg, and attorney also in Joburg. And I'm in Cape Town. So it's important that you realize that those guys on the left-hand side are non-geographical, whereas the guys on the right-hand side definitely need to be geographical. They need to be near the property. They need to understand the area and need to leverage their expertise, surrounding area to make sure that you're investing properly. Quickly going to go through the property team because we're coming to the end of the hour. It's over an hour already, sorry. So the property team, your builder, plumber, electrician, gas engineer if you have any gas installations, and your tiler, painter, carpenter, landscaper, and your maintenance team. Out of all of those guys, it's important that you do vet the guys, especially getting into the market and you've never done a renovation before. You really need to check the guys out properly. Now, it's funny how a lot of people will meet a builder, for example. He'll arrive with a whole portfolio of properties that he took photos of and says, look, this is my work. And you're like, oh, that's beautiful. I'm picking you. The problem there is twofold. Is you firstly don't know whether that's their property that they've actually renovated. And part two is, are they not only going to take photos of the best job they've ever done? So what I would do and suggest is either one of two things. If you're in an area that you don't know, try and find a builder that's working in the area and walk on site and have a sort of conversation. There's two reasons there. You know they work in the area, and second, you can walk around the site and see what the site looks like when they weren't expecting you and they didn't need to worry about you arriving. Part two is if you already know the builder, or you want to just go to a couple of the jobs that they're currently working on. And unfortunately, the builder you want is the guy who's busy, not the guy who's not doing any work. Because the guy who's not doing the work is not doing the work for a reason. So you don't want that desperate builder who's free and available now. You really want the guy who is busy and you want to plan ahead. Remember, the transfer process around property is generally 3 months. So you could always give a 3-month lead time for that builder to start to work in your property. As Neil is asking for the slides, you can absolutely have the slides. I'll put them together in PDF and send them via email, or have the team send it via email to you guys. So you really want to be sitting in a position where you check out the builder. Plumber, you really make sure, please make sure you get a good plumber. A quick story here, my brother-in-law killed me for doing this, but he built a property out in Joburg, and he picked a plumber who was cheaper than the rest. And once the build was complete, moved into the house, and then they realized that a lot of plumbing was done poorly. They had leaks all over the place, and I'm talking internal walls. The hot and cold was swapped around. Drainage was a massive issue in the property, and they had to put really expensive tiles down. And for them to fix that issue, it was going to cost them like 100,000 rand actually, because they had to break out all the tiles, break out all the pipework, and reinstall pipework and fix all the work that had been done. Now, if they just used somebody who was slightly more expensive, yes, it would have been more expensive on the build cost, but it would have saved them a lot of money and pain and issues down the line, because they wouldn't have to go out and break those tiles again. So when you get into the plumbing, water is the single biggest issue, or can cause the single biggest issue in property, from a landlord perspective, or by owning property, or when you build. So make sure that your plumbing is done right. Project manager oversees it. That's again just leaving you some of the experience that you pay for them to oversee the job to make sure that it's done. If you have that skill set, that's awesome. If you don't, get a project manager in. They'll save you more money than it's worth trying to do it on your own. Again, good qualified electrician that will issue a certificate of compliance to you once the work is done. Vitally important. Gas engineer, like I said, gas installations. Tiler, painters, carpenters are guys that you want to have available to yourself, because when you're using a project manager or builder, you're generally paying a margin for on top of these guys. But if you just need a tiling job done, you don't need to go to a builder to get a tiler to get the work done. Just get a tiler in. Again, make sure those guys are good. It's really easy to check out on YouTube, for example, what a good tiling job looks like, what it should be. And don't take these guys to talk circles around you. There's lots of information on the internet for you to look at to understand what a really good job should look like, how the line should be, how the spaces should be, what should be underneath. You know, one thing is always check that the tiles aren't hollow underneath once you install them, because they'll break in no time. Painter, also very important to have, you know, a painter that's capable and able. And you know, a lot of guys will just pick up guys next to Builders Warehouse. Nothing wrong with that, but also just make sure that they are capable and good. When you are painting, however, please don't pick up the Builders Warehouse contract paint. That's just painting loose chalk onto your wall that you can rub off with a sponge. Invest in the paint. The paint investment for you over the long term in your property will pay itself 10 times over. 10 to 15 years in one good paint job. Washable paint inside the property, and when you have a tenancy, you know, when they move out, you literally take a sponge, you can clean that wall in general, as long as they haven't damaged it, and work really well. I'll speak about landscaper only because curb appeal is vitally important to both tenants and potential buyers when you're going to try and sell a property. So just get a landscaper in. Again, if you've got a green thumb, which I certainly don't have, you need a good landscaper. And last but not least, but for me the most important, is the maintenance team. Because a lot of landlords will buy property and then do no maintenance for years and years and years, and then complain when the tenant tries to complain about certain works. Having a maintenance team in place is vitally important to keep up the property's value, keep maintaining it on an ongoing basis. So make sure that your team goes in at least every 6 months, rectifies a few small things, and the shelf. Maintenance things that will make your life much, much easier. So vitally important that you have a good maintenance team in place. By maintaining your property, you ensure that the property is an appreciating asset. But remember, a property can also be a depreciating asset. By not maintaining, by not looking after it, it can depreciate in value very, very quickly and cost you a lot of money. I've got a friend who's got a property in Benoni who didn't do any maintenance of the property, and she's about to spend just on 100,000 rand in renovations. The kitchen needs to be entirely redone, the bathroom needs to be redone, and doesn't need to be redone because it's old. It needs to be redone because it wasn't taken care of. Water seeping down the side, and it was left cheap to put silicone and sort of stop all the little leaks and everything else. Tiles are falling off from the bathroom. So that 100,000 rand actually offsets the entire capital appreciation that they've experienced in that property over the last 4 or 5 years. So they've now basically lost that money in terms of cash flow that they've put into property now to look after it. And the reason it's become really relevant now that the tenant has moved out and now they really need to re-rent it, and they're unable to re-rent it. So that tenant was willing to live there in a state, but now that she's moved out, they can't now re-rent it and have to spend 100,000 rand. So ongoing maintenance is vitally important, having a very good maintenance team. Now you can have a maintenance team, or your property manager should have a very good maintenance team, but you need to have one somewhere, and also realize that that's going to be an ongoing cost to what you're doing. And these are geographical guys, obviously they're in that space. Okay, so that's an hour and 15 minutes of goals, strategy, and your expert team. Again, haven't got any more questions at the moment, but if there are any questions, you're welcome to email me on grant@onlyrealty.co.za. And what I'll do is I'll take 5 minutes from the next session just to answer a few questions that come in, and then take things from there into our next session. So really day one was about strategy and goals, and I was saying, if you can't see the wood from the trees, if I'm speaking a bit fast, or anything that you sort of want to ask, just make sure you ask questions. So you're welcome to ask questions while I'm sort of wrapping up today, and then again, I'll answer anything I can now and refer back to anything in the next session. Cool. No, thanks for that, guys. So the schedule, today we did strategy, goals, and expert team, and next week we're going to do asset protection structure. So sort of referring back to David's question around asset protection and structure, what it should look like, and I'll just do a generic structure that you should consider, and then financing, and I'm hoping to have one of the Uber teams on the webinar just to sort of give you advice around what the banks are looking at the moment, how to structure it, if you're financing in individual name or company name, what you should do, what you need. So I'll give them about 15-20 minutes just to have that chat. Next week we'll talk about financing. I'll also speak about other opportunities to finance your property, investment strategies outside of traditional financing, so away from bonds, and just opportunities you can make use of to finance the growth in your property portfolio or buying into property without traditional bank finance. And then just a reminder, session 3 is the office purchase and conveyancing process. Session 4 is tools and research. 5 is the running numbers, return investment, and then the last one is how to manage your property and prevention, better than cure, the Rental Housing Act, and then some eviction stuff. Again, if you have anything else you want to add on to this, or sort of want more insight in, you're welcome to sort of drop me a mail. Again, it's grant@onlyrealty.co.za. And then just a quick thank you to everybody for joining today, and hopefully that was added some value to you guys and helps a lot. And I hope that you can join me next week, Wednesday, same time, for what I hope is only an hour next week for you all. But thanks very much, guys.